This lesson is complex fractions part 1. So here we have an example where I have fractions divide by another fractions. One more time, fractions divide by another fractions. So we are going to use the rule keep, change, flip. Okay, so the top we keep, division we change to multiplication, and the bottom we will flip. Okay, so one more time, keep, change, flip. One more time, top we keep, division change to multiplications, and then the bottom we will flip. Okay, so again, follow the rule. When you have fractions, divide by fractions. One more time, fractions divide by fractions. You will keep, change to multiplications, and then flip. Okay, and then after that you will do the factors, find out the factors, and then anything that looks the same we will cancel. So here 3 is already factored, x is already factored, so we leave it alone. Here we have x squared, so 2x. 9 can be factored into 3. And then after that, anything looks the same, we cancel. So this 3 and this 3 are the same, we cross out. This x and this x are the same, so we cross out. Anything that is not crossed out will become the final answer. Okay, so the only thing left is x over 3. So x over 3 will be our answer. Okay. Next example, very similar to it. However, we have adding fractions, divide by adding fractions. So we have to take care of adding fractions first before we can do keep, change, flip. Okay, so we have adding fractions. So let's take care of the top. So 1 can be rewritten as 1 over 1. Don't forget the plus, and then 1 over x. Okay, so fractions, add fractions. So when you add fractions, you will cross multiply. So 1 times x gives me x. Don't forget the plus. And then 1 times 1 give me this 1. And then bottom multiply, 1 times x gives me this x. Okay, so one more time. This 1 is rewritten as 1 over 1 plus 1 over x. Okay, cross multiply, 1 times x gives me this x. 1 times 1 gives me this 1. Don't forget the plus. Under multiply, 1 times x will be this x. Okay, now do the same procedure for the bottom as well here. Do the same procedure for this bottom adding fractions. So again, this 1 be rewritten as 1 over 1. Don't forget the plus, 1 over x squared. So same procedure, 1 times x squared is x squared, plus 1 times 1 gives me 1. Under multiply, 1 times x squared is x squared. Okay, so one more time. This problem, I have fractions, adding fractions, divide by adding fractions. So we take care of adding fractions first for the top and also for the bottom as well. Okay, again, to add fractions, make sure you do cross multiply. 1 times x is x, 1 times 1 is 1. Under multiply, 1 times x is this x. Okay, and don't forget the plus. Do the same procedure for the bottom fractions as well. Okay, once that is done, now you can do, now if you look at this very carefully, it is very similar to the first example where I have fractions divide by fractions. One more time, fractions divide by fractions. So we will follow the rule keep. So keep, change, division becomes multiply, and then the bottom fractions, it is flip. One more time, keep, change, flip. Okay, so keep, change, flip. All right, and as you can see, once it is done, keep, change, flip. Now find the factors. Since x plus 1 is already factored, leave it alone. This x is already factored, leave it alone. this x squared can be rewritten as 2x. Here's 1x, there's another x. This x squared plus 1 cannot be factored, so leave it alone. Anything looks the same, we cross out. So this x and this x are the same, we cross out. Anything that is not crossed out will become the final answer. So this x plus 1 and this x are not canceled out, we leave it on top. This x squared plus 1, leave it in the bottom, and that becomes our final answer. Okay, so be very careful. One more time, I have adding fractions, divide by adding fractions. So add the fractions first, and then add for the top, and then add the fractions for the bottom. Once it becomes fractions, divide by fractions, you will keep, change, flip. Factored, after you factored, anything looks the same, cancel. Anything that are not canceled becomes our final answer. Okay, so be very careful. The next example, same situations. Okay, so I have fractions, subtracting fractions, divide by adding fractions. So one more time, subtracting fractions, divide by adding fractions. So the procedure are exactly the same. So here we go, x times x gives me x squared. Don't forget the minus. And then x plus 1 times 1 gives me x plus 1. Okay, and then under multiply. Under multiply, x plus 1 times x is just x plus 1. Okay, so be very careful. One more time, x times x gives me x squared, minus x plus 1 times 1 gives me x plus 1 again. And then all over, under multiply, x plus 1 times x gives me this. Okay, but don't multiply the bottom, just put them next to each other. Okay, same procedure for the bottom as well. Okay, so do the procedure again for the bottom. So x times x gives me x squared. Don't forget the plus. X plus 1 times 1 gives me this x plus 1. And then under multiply, x plus 1 times 1 is this part right here. Okay, again for the denominator, x plus 1 times x for this right here. For the bottom multiplications, just leave it as is. Do not multiply, just put them next to each other so that we can cancel later on. Okay, and then after that, get rid of this minus and get rid of this plus. So x squared is just x squared, negative times x, negative times 1 is negative 1. The bottom, leave it alone. Okay, over here, again, the bottom, there's nothing to do, leave it alone. Repeat that step for the bottom fractions as well. So x squared plus x plus times x is positive x, positive times 1 is positive 1. Okay, and the bottom, there's nothing to do, leave it as is. Okay, so be very careful. Again, when you have fractions, when you have adding and subtracting fractions. So subtracting fractions, divide by adding fractions. So you can have adding fractions, divide by adding fractions. You can have another variation, subtract fractions, divide by add fractions. And the next variation is subtract fractions, divide by subtract fractions. So just make sure that you cross multiply. Again, x times x gives me this x squared. Don't forget this minus. Okay, x plus 1 times 1 is this x plus 1. Under multiply, I have x plus 1 times x is this here. Repeat that same procedure for the bottom. Okay, so x times x gives me x squared, plus x plus 1 gives me 1, that's here, and then x plus 1 times x gives me this part right here. Okay, and then after that, make sure you simplify a little bit more, because there's a minus right here, there's a negative right here. So x squared, there's this x squared, negative times x gives me this negative x, negative times 1 gives me negative 1. Okay, the bottom, there's nothing to do, so leave that alone. Now let's do the bottom fractions here. X squared, positive times x is positive x, positive times 1, positive 1. Okay, the bottom, leave it alone as well. Okay, and then now it comes back to fractions, divide by fractions. One more time, fractions, divide by fractions. So follow the rule, keep, change, flip. Keep, change, flip. So keep the top we keep exactly. Divisions become multiplications, and then the bottom we flip. Okay, so keep, change, flip. Again, keep, change, flip. When I have fractions, divide by fractions. Okay, and then after that, factor if you can. If not, leave it alone. And then after you factored, anything looks the same, we cancel. One more time, factored. Make sure you factored. All right, factor for the first fractions, factor for the second fractions. If you can factor it, good. And if not, leave it alone. One more time, if you can factor it, that means, so leave it. If you can factor it, then factor it. If you cannot, then you just leave it alone. And then after factoring, if anything looks the same, we cross out. So as you can see, this right here is exactly as the bottom here. So we cross that out. The x squared minus x minus 1 cannot be factored, leave it alone. Same thing down here, x squared plus x plus 1 cannot be factored, so we leave it alone. One more time, if you can factor, then factor. If you cannot factor, leave it alone. Anything looks the same, we cross out. So this is the same as this, we cross out. We cannot cross out this nor this, so we leave it alone, and that becomes our final answer. Okay, so one more time, factor it out. If you can factor, then factor. If not, leave it alone. Anything looks the same, we cross out. If you cannot factor, if you cannot cancel, leave it alone, and that becomes our final answer. Okay, so be very careful. One more time, subtracting fractions, adding fractions, take care of that first. After that, it will become fractions, divide by fractions. Follow the rule, keep, change, flip. Factored, if not, leave it alone. Anything that looks the same, cross out. Anything that are not cross out becomes our final answer. Okay, so be very careful.